Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing Great White, and in particular, a tribute to Jack Russell, the lead vocalist of Great White, who sadly, I found out today, has passed away at the age of 63. So I wasn't planning on doing a show on Great White or talking about Jack Russell, but when I heard about this today, I thought it's time to maybe to talk about the band a little bit and just show some of the albums I've got in my collection, the Great White albums. I've talked about Great White from time to time on my show, and really like the band, great band. They actually formed. They formed in the late 70s. Jack Russell hooked up with Mark Kendall, I think around 1977. They weren't they weren't using the name Great White at that point, and they played some gigs, but unfortunately Jack Russell got himself in a bit of trouble with the law. So there was some sort of a robbery and a shooting, and he was actually ended up being sentenced to 8 years in jail. Ended up only doing, I think, 18 months, and then when he got out, hooked up with Mark Kendall again, and that was the start of Great White. Now, Great White, previously to being Great White, had been known as Dante Fox, and they'd been sort of, touring around the LA area and doing gigs and so forth. So they were kind of a known band, but they then got, when they got Jack Russell back in the band, they became Great White. And they also hooked up with Alan Niven, who became their manager, did songwriting with them. And, Alan Niven's quite well known as well for having been the manager of Guns N' Roses. And, through the mid sort of late 80s, he was managing both bands. So anyway, let's have a look at some of the records I've got in my collection, the Great White records I have in my collection. Now, they did start off more of a sort of traditional heavy metal band, early 80s, mid 80s type of sound for for heavy metal, and then they sort of moved into a more bluesy hard rock type of sound. But their first album actually wasn't an album; it was an EP. So the first one was a EP, 5 tracks. Although interesting, on this is the reissued release. It says "On Your Knees," the first LP, but it's not a long play. It's an EP. It's just got 5 tracks on it. It's got a cool hype sticker here, really hyping it up. I think this came out in 87, something like that, but originally came out in 83. And it's got, the 5 songs on it. They're the guys there at the back there. There's Jack Russell. Produced by Don Dokken and Michael Wagner. And of course, their manager is Alan Niven, and Alan Niven and Don Dokken were, and I think Michael Wagner as well, all kind of buddies, and, worked together and done stuff together. So there's that connection there. But the 2 tracks, Last Time and No Way, do not end up on the debut album, the debut full-length album. And for me, they're probably the 2 best songs on this EP. So, this is kind of, pretty essential for me to have. But, and like I say, it's actually said it's recorded in 1982. So I think it probably was released in 83, because that's what I see online as the release date. But recorded in 82. So in 1982, this sounds fantastic. Really good stuff. And it's interesting. It's got some, because it's a reissue, it's talking about the PMRC here. And it's this is totally not politically correct. I mean, look at the cover, On Your Knees. And then here it says, dedicated to Bob and Gail, to rockers, and yes, to Tipper. If you can't rock me, I know your daughter will, because the whole PMRC thing at the time. But supposedly it says here the original print of this record was limited to a run of 15,000. It got reissued probably around the time that Once Bitten came out, I think. But and they had some success there. They reissued this. But anyway, that's the first release, and the 5-track EP, and then after that on EMI they released their debut full-length album, and mine is a promo copy, embossed cover, just Great White here. And there's the guys on the back. There's Jack Russell. Weirdly, it's got no song titles on the back or anywhere. So you've kind of got to look inside, look at the label of the record to see the song titles. Produced by Michael Wagner again. Assisted by Michael Lardy and Wyn Davis. Wyn Davis ends up producing the next album. But this has got the Who cover Substitute on it, but probably my 2 go-to songs on this one would be Bad Boys and Stick It. They're really good. So, and of course, it's got 3 tracks from the that EP that I showed before as well. All right, so that's the first album, and then next up, Shot in the Dark. So that's their second album. Again, this one's got another hype stick on it. Also, talking about Face the Day, because that's a cover of the Angels song. And here the guys are at the back, like I said, produced by Wyn Davis. I don't know about this. This is Jack Russell, and they've got a photo of him holding a gun. This is a guy who, maybe I don't. I never heard about this conviction back in the day. I only heard about it later on. But yeah, he'd been convicted of armed robbery, and here he is in the back cover holding a gun. But anyway, so there he is there, and there's the rest of the guys. Mark Kendall. And yeah, I mean, these are the two main guys, aren't they, of Great White? There's some good songs on here. Runaway is probably my favorite, but yeah, again, this is more, it's less sort of traditional heavy metal. They're starting to get a little bit more hard rock, but the bluesy stuff hasn't quite started creeping in yet. Interesting, my copy is Telegraph Records, which is not the usual label for this. It's usually on Capitol. So I'm not quite sure why that is, but yeah, it was initially, most releases are on the Capitol Records label. All right, so that's the second release, and the next one's the one where they actually got some MTV play. They had some success, had some radio play, and Great White, Once Bitten, and there they are at the back there, more of the sort of look at the time. So this is, 1980, 86, I think this comes out, and 87 maybe. And so here now the production's Niven, Lardy, and Kendall from the band. Niven's their manager, of course. And I never liked, they did this on all of their albums. They just put all the song titles together. So I said before, their debut didn't even have any song titles on it. And then what they then started doing is putting all their song titles together. It makes it a little bit tricky to work out the songs, because all the word letters are together. But and I don't even think they're in the right order of how they come up on the album. But anyway, lots of good songs. This would probably be my favorite Great White album. All Over Now, Lady Red Light, On the Edge. That's probably one of my personal favorites. Save Your Love was, of course, a bit of a hit, but I do really like that song. Rock Me's very good as well. Yeah, just lots of good songs on here. But again, now this is where the bluesy stuff starts coming in. And to be honest with you, this is where Jack Russell really starting to shine vocally. He just sounds really good on this. We know that because of the songs that they cover, that they're obviously big fans of Led Zeppelin, 70s rock. But they pull it off really well. So there we go. Once Bitten, album number 3. And yeah, finally they get a bit of a breakthrough and some success. And that success means, like I said, that EP got reissued, and they also released a live album. This is called Recovery Live. Now, my version's got tracks from 1986, talking about Led Zeppelin, so they're covering Immigrant Song, Rock and Roll. In fact, a lot of cover songs from that 86 concert, and then 87 at the Marquee. More songs from their more recent albums, but there's also a version of this album that has some tracks from 1983. I think it might be the American version of this. It still has the 86 songs, but instead of the Marquee, it has some songs from 1983 on there. So there's actually 2 different versions, slightly different. One side's different for this, but yeah, Recovery Alive. And the next studio album is, so the previous album was Once Bitten, and so quite clever, really, isn't it? They then have ... Twice Shy, which of course that song is on here, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, which was another hit for them. It's probably maybe their biggest hit, a cover song, of course. Yeah, like I said again, they're doing all the song titles all together at the back there. I don't like this album as much as Once Bitten, but I do like the song Move It, Heart the Hunter. There's some good songs. But it's starting to get just maybe a little bit too bluesy for me, a little bit less hard rock. Yeah, so same production as last time. Alan Niven, Michael Lardy. Yeah, and like I said, this was another hit for them, especially with the success of "Once Bitten, Twice Shy," that cover song, and yeah, and Jay Russell, there he is, there, still sounding fantastic on vocals. So yeah, and my copy's a special double pack, so it's actually got a whole album, the Live at the Marquee official bootleg. Basically, it's the songs from the previous album I showed you, plus about 3 or 4 other ones as well. All right, next one, I've got the Uncensored. I think this you can get, there are censored versions of this cover, where the lady's actually underwater, but mine is her being hooked up and she's above water, which is nice. And yeah, so the album's called Hooked. And this one again, they're really getting bluesy now, and I don't like this album as much as their 2 previous, and certainly not as much as Once Bitten. I do like Heartbreaker. I think that's a really good song, but again, it's quite bluesy, sort of Led Zeppelin type influences too coming in here. But that sort of sound this is 1991, but there were some bands having some success with that type of sound. So, and they will obviously, I think, even 1991, they're trying to move away from the sort of hair metal sound or even the heavy metal sound, and more that sort of 70s hard rock, blues rock type sound. What else? Call it rock and roll. It's okay, but yeah, for me, a bit disappointing. And there's quite a few slow pace songs on this one. So yeah, not one of my favorites, but Jack Russell still sounds great. The band, I'm sure I never saw them in concert, but I'm sure they would have been a great band to see in concert. Right, this is the last album I've got on vinyl, and this one came out must have just been a year later, because this one's 1992, and yeah, I think this one's well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I thought it was called, it's got Rose Motel there, but I thought it was called Psycho Motel. Yeah, oh, sorry, Psycho City. Psycho City, there we go. Yeah, it's got Rose Motel there. There we go. And then Psycho City is down there. So that's the title of the album, Psycho City. I think this one's probably a little bit better than the previous, but again, still not. They're still really getting into that sort of bluesy kind of sound, more rock, not metal, not that heavy. But Step on You, now that's one of their heavier ones. That's a good song. I really like that one. But after that, apart from that, again, they're just moving into a sound that yeah, it wasn't I didn't like as much as some of their albums previously, like the Once Bitten, and especially, and even some of the songs from their album before that, which was Shot in the Dark. Yeah, so even Shot in the Dark is probably my second favorite. Yeah, Once Bitten would be my favorite, and then Twice Shy probably third. But and then it's album. Well, I mean, to be honest, the first album also would probably be better than the Twice Shy album. But yeah, it's interesting. It only took them another year to before they put this one out, and this is 1992. And of course, it's getting hard for these bands from the 80s, 1992, to get much sort of airplay. MTV's sort of like, nah, you're not the thing anymore. So that kind of helped them. And then they pretty much they don't disappear, but they certainly don't. They're certainly not as popular as what they had been, but they do continue to release albums throughout the 90s, which not all bands did. So I think in 94 they had Sail Away, and then a couple of years later, Let It Rock, which was actually quite a good album. I thought that was quite, for a mid-90s album, I thought that was pretty good. That had Let It Rock has a song called My World on it that I really like. And yeah, basically they just they carry on. I think they released another album on Portrait in the late 90s. Yeah, I'm starting to lose interest at this point, really. I didn't particularly like the late 90s album that they released. And of course, then they had that. Well, in fact, what happened? They actually broke up. So they did a final concert. That was kind of it. They even released some, compilations or albums that were saying it was the final cuts sort of thing. And yeah, that was supposedly the end of Great White. And then Jack Russell, I think, went out and just as a solo artist, and then I think it started being called Jack Russell and Great White, or Jack Russell's Great White, or something like that. And then unfortunately there was the Rhode Island nightclub fire, which unfortunately is one of those things that when people think of Great White, they may think about that first, but which is a shame, but it is of course a terrible tragedy. So yeah, over 100 people died at the Rhode Island nightclub fire. So yeah, that must have been a very hard thing to kind of overcome. But interestingly enough, that does get associated with Great White, but officially it wasn't Great White. But yeah, I mean, it really was at that point. I think they were using the name to sort of help get people along to to the gigs. And then of course, Great White did officially kind of get back together. Released a few albums. Jack Russell then ends up leaving the band, or I'm not sure what the circumstances were. Maybe he was asked to leave. He goes solo. There's a lawsuit. So again, just like that whole, unfortunately, like a lot of these 80s bands, they're fighting over who owns the name to the band, who owns the band name. There were a few issues there, lawsuits, so forth. And it ends up Jack Russell just goes around touring as Jack Russell's Great White. Great White, well, they've had a few different vocalists. Terry Eloise from XYZ has been one of them. But they've had a few. And released a few albums as well without Jack Russell. But I think Jack Russell had such a distinctive voice. I think for a lot of people, the real Great White was probably the one that was fronted by Jack Russell. But it is what it is, and of course, this is Great White's not the only band who've had these sort of things happen where the singer leaves the band, and there's two versions of the band. So basically, both those two entities, Great White and Jack Russell's Great White, have sort of been carrying on over the last few years. And I know a few months ago there was some footage of Jack doing a concert where I think he was in a wheelchair, or sitting down, and it didn't look that great. And sadly, I've learned today that he has passed on. So very sad. But I thought it'd be nice to do a tribute to him and the music that he has created. Fantastic collection of songs and albums. He's definitely, obviously a guy who really loved the rock and roll lifestyle. Maybe too much at times, I think he definitely liked to party and have a good time. And, obviously, at dying at 63, it's not young, but, maybe if he looked after himself, he may have been around for a bit longer. Who knows? But I do know that, and I know this until today, that he's actually just put out a book, which is, I think something that would be great to read. Interesting timing. That's only just come out like in the last month or so, I think. So great that at least, he's been able to get that out before passing away. And it's called The True Tale of Mr. Bone, a rock and roll narrative. So that might be worth checking out. All right, I'm sure he's got some great stories. All right, well, that's it for today. Just a bit of a profile of Great White, and especially just, talking about the vocalist Jack Russell. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I know there's probably been a few other shows about Jack Russell. I've already seen a few on the YouTube stream there, and because, I think the people who follow me, or people who, follow hard rock or 80s metal, that sort of thing, that sort of would definitely, have appreciated, everything that Jack Russell contributed. All right, that's it for today. So, leave me your comments about Great White, especially Jack Russell, and hit the thumbs up if you've enjoyed this. And if you haven't subscribed, always great to get new subscribers. All right, thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. See ya.